there is no end of the things that we want to accomplish on our roadmap. There is no end of the things that our clients have requested us to incorporate into the product. No plans of going to say, oh, we're going to eliminate or we're going to get rid of developers because we're utilizing AI. What we would say is like, we'll be able to accelerate our roadmap. The things that we said we're going to take 18 months to deliver, hopefully take half the time or even less.
Welcome to the Fund AI Pod. I have the privilege today of having a guest with deep technology expertise and vast knowledge of the funds ecosystem. He started in Silicon Valley and has worked in North America, Europe, and APAC. And he is currently the head of APAC for SimCorp. Edward B., welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Iain.
Ed, I gave a brief overview of where you've come from and what you've done, but why don't you give the audience the full story of your career to date?
Yeah, thanks. As you mentioned, born and bred in California. My first job out of university was at Yahoo during the original .com boom, subsequent burst. From there, I went to an IBM spinout, and back in 2005, I actually decided to make the move into FinTech. So from technology into more specifically even investment technology, worked at a software that we provided the investment infrastructure for hedge funds. So back in the day when people didn't really know what hedge funds were, one of our interview questions used to be, do you know what a hedge fund is? And in 2005, 1 out of 10 person got that right. So I stayed with that company for nearly 15 years. So they were the ones that originally brought me to London. I was actually trying to come to APAC, but they made me go to EMEA, London first, and use that parlay to get actually down to Hong Kong, stayed with them to run APAC. From there, I actually took a job to launch a business for a private market software company. About 3.5 years ago, I took a job with SimCorp to take over, run the Asia Pacific region for the organization, and have been doing that for the past 3.5 years.
Now, most of our audience will know who SimCorp is, but for those that don't, who is SimCorp? What do they do? And who are their clients?
So SimCorp is the most established buy-side technology provider in the space. So started in 1971. So actually the largest Danish fintech company across Denmark. But they originally started to support the mortgage-backed security space. So Denmark has a very similar mortgage structure to the Americas, and consequently had some complex mortgage-backed derivatives. So in order to be able to handle the investment of those derivatives, SimCorp was born. And so that was kind of the genesis of SimCorp. And for the last 50 plus years, the product's been growing and focused primarily on serving kind of the buy-side asset management and asset owner space. It's fairly geared at the top of the market. So people that are having minimum 10 billion and over in terms of AUM, really kind of institutional grade, and also providing full front to back investment operations.
So you get to see front, middle, and back, which is unique in the industry. Often vendors tend to play in one or two of those spaces, but you're all three. So when you're dealing with prospects, what are common data or operational challenges that you see with the buy side that SimCorp comes in and solves?
So I think if you trace back any investment operations challenge, at the heart of it, there is some data structural thing that needs to be solved. So regardless of how they present, what the symptoms are, the diagnosis is often the fact that there is some underlying data challenge, whether it's reconciliation across different systems, whether it's integration because of different asset classes or different platforms. We at SimCorp are full front, middle, and back, but that's because we are the most established, but because we've also put a lot of emphasis in putting a lot of money, effort, R&D back into the product. So we've had the luxury of being able to extend the platform across the entire suite from front to back, but also multi-asset class. always with a goal in mind of actually solving that data structural challenge by being able to have one established place where you can have a single source of investment truth.
And that is a good point. So to be clear, across front, middle, and back, is it one data source, or how do you integrate across that lifecycle workflow?
And that's the distinguishing thing. And then sometimes that's actually a hard message to get into the market, because if you look at our tagline versus our competitors' taglines, to be honest, they all look relatively similar. Like a lot of them are going to say they're front to back multi-asset class systems. But the distinguishing factor between SimCorp and a lot of the other market providers is that it is actually all in one system. So in other cases, people may have purchased a private market system or purchased an accounting system and tried to stitch those together with either their own inbuilt integration or through some type of data warehouse platform layer, where we took a different approach and frankly, a more challenging and more timely approach, where we took the time to build it directly into the system, extending the investment workflows across the entire platform.
One of the things we talk about in this podcast is data integration and the keys, therefore, for AI. But just diving into data integration, what are the benefits then of having one unified data platform integrated? What does that allow you to do? What benefits does it give you and your clients?
I think as we start thinking about emerging technology and we start thinking about the ability to take advantage of data across different pieces of technology and being able to utilize AI, utilize even digital assets, all these other things, the distinguishing factor really comes down to is the quality of the data underlying. Luckily, that has always been the ethos of what we've done, is to be able to have a single trusted source where you can attribute all of your investment data. So we call it the investment book of record, or IBOR. And we're not saying that all data has to be on our system, but the hardest data, that the one that creates all those problems across front to back and multi-asset class, is all of the data around your investments, all of the transaction data, all of the cash data, all of the data that has uniqueness in terms of calculation by asset class, by region, by currencies. And also then you layer on the fact that a lot of that data has to be real time, right? Tick by tick, second by second data, and calculating based off of those unique asset class specific calculations. So that generally becomes the hardest thing for people to have trust in, especially once you start integrating, especially once you start trying to mash data together. So what we're trying to do is solve for that, but then make that data available through open architecture, open platforms. So that way you can take advantage of other technologies. We know we're not going to be all things to all people. We're not going to be at the bleeding edge of AI in every respect. We're not going to be at the bleeding edge in digital assets in every respect. But what we can do is provide a trusted source of information, so that way you can utilize different platforms without having to do complex reconciliations, complex data integrations.
Excellent. And I think you brought up AI, so great pivot there. One of the benefits or needs for AI is good data. And then one of the use cases is workflows, and you cover both data and workflows. So I imagine you've got a lot of good AI use cases, but can you walk us through how you first approached AI, how you thought about it, and how you got started on it?
Yeah, I think we've had the either being smart or being a bit lucky, the ability to build our next generation, our new user experience at a time where generative AI was really taking off. And we also had established a partnership with Microsoft at that time to help build our middleware layer, our infrastructure, to be able to provide a cloud native GUI and user interface. So the ability to extend that and be able to utilize the Microsoft Azure AI tools was quite natural to us. It was just another part of the extension of the middleware layer. So the first thing that we did in thinking about that was, how do we incorporate that into the workflows for that new user experience? How do we give and present people the ability to utilize large language models to produce graphical interfaces, agents that could go out and systematically be able to represent complex data visualizations on the fly? But actually, that's the first integrated piece of AI technology across our platform. If we actually roll the clock all the way back, probably the very first AI use case that was getting very prevalent even years ago was the ability to take unstructured data, particularly in the private market space, which doesn't have the luxury of having a lot of structured data or uniform protocols that the public markets has generated and created and refined over the past decades.
And often when we talk about AI, people put it into two buckets. The first bucket is productivity and efficiency, and then the second one is insight/creativity. So either new products, new features, or insights into data that you didn't have before. Often what we find is people start with productivity and efficiency because it's a lower hanging fruit. It gets you started, also then frees up capacity to do insights. So I'm just curious, when you started, did you start with efficiency and productivity? And did you start with some internal workflows initially to learn it, test it before you rolled out to clients? Or did you jump in the deep end?
I think we jumped in simultaneously. So the first dip in the toe wasn't even our AI tool. So we actually embedded some emerging AI platforms. So going back to the use case that I mentioned about private markets. So one of the common workflows that people are challenged with is that in their private market investments, they're getting a lot of information that's just sent in a PDF, sent in just natural language, but they need to be able to extrapolate that data, turn that into a transaction. It could be a capital call or a capital distribution that has an investment impact on their book. So they need to take that and then be able to say, okay, I need to be able to either include or exclude the amount of money, the cash, or reserve that. Also, they get a lot of quarterly reports from their investments that they utilize to properly value the private market type of investments that they have. So that first use case was actually very evident. So we actually partnered with a couple of different providers where we embedded that technology into the platform. So that way we can consume that and be able to build a work stream to translate that into the appropriate transaction. That's probably the first place that we dipped our toe, and then also opened our platform to integrations because of what I was describing before, where we have that set of data and we want to make sure that we can open it up to be able to utilize different tools. Another one was a fixed income AI tool that can use kind of the predictive nature to look at what potentially the spreads should be, what potentially ratings should be, so that you can use that as part of investment thesis or investment operational aspect. So that was where we started getting our first look and really realizing the capabilities that AI had. So I think that would fall into your efficiency bucket. At the same time, we started looking internally about how do we look at our own health tickets and then be able to provide a summarization so that people that are supporting our clients can have the benefit of collating a lot of that information across. Obviously, then we're a technology company, and I think now probably the most major use case, that's being out there for AI is to help companies like ourselves to be able to develop more quickly and more efficiently. So that's all been intertwined, I would say, between our own internal usage, then finally embedding as talked about previously into our platform and being able to give our users an experience directly through the tools that we provide.
Now, I mentioned two buckets in terms of AI, productivity and efficiency, and then insights and creativity. I understand in your recent APAC roadshows, you were able to demonstrate some data visualizations created on the fly in real time. Is that correct? And then if so, could you kind of walk us through what those capabilities are?
When we embedded our Copilot tool, there were a number of different use cases that was, how can we make this particularly useful for our clients? One of the areas that we focused on was exactly where you were talking about, being able to grab insights, being able to look across a book of holdings or the portfolio and be able to use the tool to create a data visualization on the fly to investigate and to persecute some of the data. This again goes back to the fact that as long as you have the data in the one system, the tools actually become quite easily to be able to create that representation. So one of the things that I demoed most recently at, we just held a Japan forum and summit in Tokyo, was the kind of duration modeling and asking it to add different data points such as the active price or the yield so that you could misrepresent that on different axes. But the next use case was even saying, like, okay, well, now write this out and then being able to copy it and put it into an email, put it into a distribution, put it into a client reporting tool. So I think those start to blend into your two use cases, right? So being able to get data insight, being able to do things more efficiently, and really kind of starting to reduce the barrier to effort. In all the time that I've been in this space in investment technology, we always show really pretty dashboards, right? We always show like great ways that are easily consumed by our end user. But in the past, those dashboards always have uniqueness based off of the person, the request, what they're looking at, what their investment strategy, even of the day may be versus the month, and how they want to quickly look at data back and forth. And in the past, that has been really challenging, right? It's usually what ends up happening is people have to agree on a particular dashboard that they use across the entire firm. So that way everyone's looking at the same kind of thing and they're minimizing the amount of effort that they're putting through. So what's really exciting about this tool is that you can just on the fly, just say, okay, now rather than me have to either dump the data into Excel, build my own data visualization, ask a team to create a report into my dashboard, just very easily ask it in natural language to show me this information and alter that information even on the fly. So that barrier to entry is before we would have maybe got to X% of the amount of data visualizations that a client or customer would have wanted to see, but the level of effort was too high. But now reducing that barrier of effort, they can potentially see any data represented in any way that they want.
The Fund AI Pod is a weekly podcast and video about AI usage in the asset management and funds industry. Each episode interviews a funds industry professional to learn how they or their firm are using AI in practical real-life examples. The goal is to inspire others in the funds industry to increase their AI adoption. If you're enjoying this podcast format and content and wish to learn more, please visit my podcast website, www.thefundaipod.com. The website includes an episodes page. The episodes page hosts all historical episodes and includes an embedded search function. In addition, you can complete and submit a podcast guest nomination form if you are or know someone who is in the funds industry and has an interesting AI story to share. Please check out my Work With Me page, where I provide multiple options to collaborate. This includes engaging my AI consulting firm Zentia to help identify top AI use cases in your firm, podcast sponsorship, speaker engagements, and white paper and content creation collaboration. Now back to our main episode. I love that concept, barrier to effort. And I think it also speaks to some of the fears some people have in the industry of all this productivity may lead to job losses, whereas I somewhat agree with the idea of the lower barrier of effort to generate new features, new output, new insights is lower. you'll use that extra efficiency to then do more, higher output, new revenue streams, etc.
I 100% agree. So are certain tasks going to be eliminated? Of course. But if not, then AI has failed. But those tasks were ones that were probably good use of human capital at the time. And even going back to as we're a software company, there is no end of the things that we want to accomplish on our roadmap. There is no end of the things that our clients have requested us to incorporate into the product. So it's all a balance of capacity and manpower and effort. So we would I have no plans of going to say, oh, we're going to eliminate or we're going to get rid of developers because we're utilizing AI. And for what we would say is like, we'll be able to accelerate our roadmap. The things that we said we're going to take 18 months to deliver, hopefully take half the time or even less, right? To be able to, and we'll be able to create and provide a richer, more comprehensive product to our customers.
And speaking of customers, do you give your clients a chatbot that allows them to query their data in terms of if they want to understand what their top 10 holdings are, they can use natural language into a chatbot to query it rather than running a static report?
Yeah, it's actually the same chatbot that we would use for those data visualizations that I was referencing. So simple, easy prompt that people are comfortable or familiar with that are utilizing the OpenAI or Gemini or Anthropics today. But the ability to query their own data, the ability to look at also even outside of our system look at things such as SharePoint sites or areas that they have on their own infrastructure that they may want to combine with data that is available and relevant in our system. I agree with your two use cases of how people are using AI, but one of the other things that I'm starting to see in terms of the use case is the combination of that structured and unstructured data. So that's starting to become a pretty useful aspect too, because all the data that our customers are going to use has to be validated and structured, has to be put into a structured database because there is no margin for error in a lot of decisions that they're making. But utilizing the tools to be able to take structured data and have a process to be able to structure that data and bring it into our data model and data system so that you have trust and validity on it. That's a big use case also. That's exactly what that type of market example I mentioned before is doing. But our ability to point it at SharePoint or be able to point it at a client's own data infrastructure says that one of the use cases we'll see is analysts, PMs oftentimes have a bunch of research sitting unstructured in emails, in documents, but being able to bring that and combine it and then put it into a structured database where now it's tied to a transaction where there is a greater level of transparency across the entire investment process by combining the structured and non-structured data, I think will also be a pretty significant use case, particularly in our space.
I do like the combining internal and external data. Although I guess it brings me to my next question related to that is how do you solve then for permissions, audibility, etc., when you're connecting to a client's SharePoint, for example? How do you know who should have access to that data and who shouldn't?
Yeah. So that has also been one of the benefits of our partnership with Microsoft Azure, being able to use and extend across Active Directory, across permissionings on user by user. Obviously, with our clients, data security and data privacy is a huge issue. So one of the first questions that we have to address and make sure that people have a level of comfort around is that none of their data ever leaves their system, right? That none of the data has any potential for access outside of their own security parameters and protocols. So when we do that by utilizing the Microsoft Azure AI infrastructure along with the data security aspect, which makes the models available to us, whether it's Anthropics or it's OpenAI, or whether it's even DeepSeek, right? So they have a tool that we can just use those off the shelf models to apply to our client's data, never bringing the client's data back for any training or for any visibility outside of their own infrastructure and permissioning.
So, Ed, you're the head of APAC, and I've worked out in Asia myself, and there's nuances in regions across language, data, processes, etc. So, from your lens, how does the regional differences in APAC impact how you approach data and your output to clients?
Yeah. So, and from your experience too, Asia Pacific is just the most fragmented market in the world. I think it's sometimes taken for granted. People are like, oh, just pop over to Australia or pop over to Japan, which can be a 7.5 hour flight, 8 hour flight. And then you layer on top of that they all have extremely different cultures, extremely different ways in terms of interacting, adoption, regulatory requirements, currencies, etc. A lot of the markets couldn't be more different from each other. So one of the most exciting use cases, I think, for our platform, for artificial intelligence in general, is closing that language gap. So I talked about Japan and showing the tool in Japan earlier. Japan is one of the most difficult markets to penetrate if you don't have local language support, because English is not widely consumed across the market. But now AI is making that go away. One of the things we were able to demonstrate was, even in that duration band modeling that I asked the tool to do, I said, actually provide this to me in Japanese. I can query it in Japanese and automatically recognizes it. I can ask for all of my result sets and the graphical representations to be in Japanese or Chinese or whichever language our client may be reciting. So it's getting to the point to where I think this translation capability is going to be a huge leap forward in ability to bring global and regional types of attributes together, because that has been a substantial blocker in the past. A lot of the other fragmentation exists too. There's no single regulatory body, right? Like at least in Europe, there is a singular regulatory body. In US, obviously one that even just using one currency. Here, everyone's kind of making their own rules, having their own governance, and that creates its own host of challenges. But being able to use technology to overcome a lot of those challenges, to be able to have a broader scope of vision, is also something that artificial intelligence is unusually good at, right? Like being able to extrapolate, take on a lot of data and synthesize that data and be able to ensure that your understanding of all of the different nuances and how those nuances are interacting with each other. I think there's a lot of capability and potential upside there.
And what about adoption of AI? You mentioned comparing to APAC and North America. How have you found the local participants' willingness to adopt AI and the related tools?
Yeah. I guess because of the fragmentation, there's not a super easy answer to that, because that also varies pretty dramatically from country to country, right? So in some parts of Asia that are incredibly digitally native, right? Because they have a young population that's grown up only on mobile, that has a high level of comfortability and sometimes also a high level of mathematical and analytical skills, where they're utilizing a lot of this technology and data. In some of the markets, particularly, for example, in Australia, there's quite a bit of regulatory governance around how AI is being used and some sensitivity of how they're going to potentially use and deploy that. So everyone is very curious and very anxious to use it and figure out what are the right use cases to deploy it, but while also staying within the confines of which they're supposed to by their whatever regulatory body that may be overseeing that.
And speaking of end user adoption, from your client perspective, is it a voluntary opt in to use these tools? And those that have used the tools, what's been their general feedback so far?
Absolutely voluntary. We also have a wide range of clients, even within our highly fragmented client base, where some are central banks, sovereign wealth funds that don't even want the internet to be able to access their systems because of security reasons. So we had to design everything in terms of optionality for our client base. But those that have used it are excited about it. We're finding more and more is people want to stay and use the AI with partner, right? Because the hardest thing has been to determine what are the use cases, right? Like we talked about some of the use cases already today, but like it's the creativity of how do you apply it to your processes, but then also in a way that you're having the data protection and privacy that we mentioned before. And so there's a lot of conversation now about what is the right amount of AI governance. And so even as the consultants are talking to asset managers or as regulatory bodies are talking to our client, they want to understand what is the exposure to AI? Are people using commercial AI tools on potentially sensitive data, deploying it within your own environment? How are you ensuring that you don't have biases that are embedded through your AI or through your own historical actions? So there's definitely a balance in there. And that's why people, I think, are really looking to providers like us for guidance and for the safety and understanding how the rest of the market is moving.
Excellent. And speaking of how the market is moving, I'd love to look forward a couple of years and see where AI and fund operations and investment operations is going. So when we think about that, what is SimCorp's R&D strategy to ensure that you're evolving together with the industry and your client needs?
For the last 50 plus years, we've put 25% of our revenue directly back into the product. And I think that is going to continue for the foreseeable future, if not forever, because that is the primary reason, or one of the primary reasons, that we have been around longer than everyone. And in that time, many people have come and gone. I've seen some of the people come and gone. I've almost worked at some of the people that have come and gone because they've have different strategies, different thoughts, and sometimes have a little bit more of a short-minded mindset. SimCorp has always been looking towards the future and being able to ensure that the product suite that we provide to the clients is going to be the most robust that we can. Right now, as I mentioned, we're pouring a huge amount of our R&D budget into the next generation UX to be able to build and create a platform that can cover whatever tomorrow brings, right? Because I think if we talk 6 months, 12 months from now, even other use cases that we haven't even got around or being able to incorporate that data. The other thing that we're doing now too is really looking at how do we provide and augment a holistic data platform. So we talked about what we can do right now, like really our core strength around the investment book of record and making people have comfort in all of that transactional position data. But people are looking at other data that sits outside of that investment workflow process, whether that is customer data, whether that's static data, whether that's corporate GL data, but having a single central repository, because utilizing the tools that we're already using today and the tools that we're going to use in the future are going to require, again, that quality of data. We're putting also some attention and emphasis on having a separate kind of holistic data platform, because the data platform and the investment book of record and the data model around that are really two separate things, because one has to be real time, one has to be asset class aware, one has to be have all this very complex business logic, and another is a repository of data. And that's why I think people have actually moved away from having a data warehouse for their investment book of records. So that was a trend for a few years, right? For even a decade, where people with best of breed realized that didn't work. Said, oh, we'll solve it by putting all the data in a data warehouse. Then they realized that they couldn't keep it up to date. They couldn't hand out all the reconciliation. So that's why the market has really moved towards having everything in a system such as ours. But again, there's two different problems, two different use cases that need to be solved. One about the real-time critical investment data, but one about full organizational data sets.
And just looking forward, as we think about the impact of AI, how will AI change the front office? And so by that, the investment managers, the portfolio managers and traders, how will that shape what they do with the use of AI?
So I think that would be really interesting because look at algorithmic trading, right? When you and I started in this field, the traders were king, right? And they're picking up the phone and calling data and they're getting good executions because of their relationship. Algorithmic trading made a lot of that all go away, right? Like, and trading actually became a much more technical aspect, and that changed the front office dramatically. Not even technically artificial intelligence, but the algorithms behind it, the trading aspect changed the landscape. For AI, I think that there's going to be, if you go back even to your use cases, right? Like in terms of being able to create greater insights, but also even being able to look at data that was never practical before because there was too much data. There was too much to be able to consume. AI is also really good at detecting anomalies or trend analysis, right? Across massive sets of data that it would have been improbable even to build a algorithmic tool to sort through the data and be able to do those kind of pattern detecting. And again, like ease of use and lower to the kind of the barrier to effort, right? So one of the things that we're building right now is moving obviously to agentic AI. So our goal right now is obviously being able to utilize AI for uh, information and re-representing information, having that information set back. We've also now are building agentic AI so that being able to allow the tools to act or interact with different aspects of the AI ecosphere. One of those would be in our risk modeling. So one of a complex thing for portfolio managers sometimes is to say, I want to set up a scenario analysis. I want to look back at COVID, or I want to look back at even the financial crisis and do some modeling, but I want to increase the interest rates, or I want to decrease the volatility or some aspect where they can run a model that they want to kind of overlap on the portfolio to be able to look at risk potential. Right now, just because of the nature of that, setting up those scenarios can be relatively complex because of all the parameters that go in. Utilizing natural language to be able to say what I just said and have the system automatically be able to go back and represent and show that back now allows you to run much more quickly, much more frequently, and much more effectively. So I think those will be very serious use cases to be able to actually just investigate the data in a way that portfolio managers at the front office haven't been able to in the past.
Very interesting. And you spoke about agents and agentic workflows. Is that where you're seeing a lot of development and focus is around agent use cases?
Yeah. So that's the second step of our three-step AI strategy. The first was being able to represent the data. The second, which we're already working on use cases like that scenario analysis testing. But the third is to be able to allow the user to be even more passive for utilizing AI to look for anomalies, look for patterns, and be able to prompt users to say, hey, this is a trade that's out of whack with your overall strategy, or this is something that's moving across that doesn't coincide with a lot of the other investments that you may have. And this is something that you may want to take a look at.
Excellent, Ed. We've covered a lot today. And as we know, the AI world moves incredibly quickly. I myself try and listen to daily podcasts, watch some YouTube videos, and struggle to keep up. So, given that you're in the world of tech, how do you keep up with AI, technology, innovation? How do you stay current?
Yeah. So I think you've hit the nose on the head. Like everything's moving so fast that if you even were to read something from a month or two ago, it's probably outdated. So I try to listen to a lot of podcasts myself.
Do you have any podcast recommendations that you would share with the audience?
My favorite is Hard Fork, which is pretty widely consumed. It's a New York Times podcast, but it's entertaining. So some of the AI podcasts I listen to, I think are useful, but a little dry and take some focus and attention to be able to glean and grab all the information out of it. Hard Fork, I think, does a good job of staying quite relevant, but also entertaining, walking kind of that line.
Excellent. Appreciate the recommendation. And then tell us, where can the audience find out more about SimCorp and their products and services?
Our website, www.simcorp.com, easily found on LinkedIn. If you Google Edward B. FinTech, I'm pretty sure I'm the only person that comes up. We're not too difficult to find because we've also been putting our name out there a little bit.
Excellent. Well, Ed, I appreciate taking the time to join the podcast today. It's been very informative and very enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ian. It's good to catch up again.
This episode is brought to you by my own company, Zentia. Zentia is an AI and automation company that has three core offerings. First, consulting to help identify and map out AI and automation opportunities for your firm. Two, we can either build or co-build with your team those agentic solutions. And three, prepackaged agents that are ready to be configured and deployed to your environment. Agents such as knowledge management agents, RFP agents, FOBO Rec Agents, and our upcoming Request AI, a requirements and project management agent. To learn more, please visit our website, www.zentia.io. That's zentia.io, or contact me on LinkedIn. If you have an AI story from the funds industry and wish to share, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Iain Carey, IAIN CAREY.